Hello! Today on Rick's Woodworking, we're going to build a base for a glass top table. Our base is going to be triangular, trying to do something a little different, with the equivalent of 4x4 posts all around. Our stretchers will be approximately 31 inches long and will require a 60-degree miter at the corners. So you can see we'll have about 4 inches from the bottom of the base to the stretcher. And the total height here is 17 and a quarter. It's because we have a 3/4 inch piece of glass. We're going to start by cutting all the pieces to length, and then we'll start doing some assembly.
I set up a stop block on my miter box and just trim the first edge of the 2x4 to make sure that we got a nice square edge. Start with the long pieces first for the stretchers, and then move on to the legs and then the smaller pieces that make up the leg to make it look like a 4x4. With all the pieces here, you'll notice that there's this little roundover that comes with 2x4s coming from any home center. So what I want to do is eliminate that. So I've just set up my fence on my table saw to just nibble away at that edge. And so I do one edge first, and I'll do this for all the pieces. Just speeding it up so you can see. And then once I've done the one side and I have all those roundovers cut away, I am going to adjust the fence slightly. Just move it in about 1/8 of an inch, maybe even less, and do the other side of the 2x4s. Now, once I've done all this, I can look at cutting the 60-degree angles for the stretchers. My miter saw only goes to 50. So what I got to do is use complementary angles. So I've set the miter saw at 30 and added that 90-degree fence. I'm supporting the piece so that it is level with the ground and the saw, and I simply cut at that 30-degree angle, but again, it's complementary, so it'll end up being 60. I'll take my time, and I'll do all 6 cuts. And this is what it looks like put together. Now for some glue. Since this piece is going to be outside, we're going to use moisture activated glue, Gorilla Glue. So I've added a little bit of water to each of the joints and spread the Gorilla Glue out. You'll notice I'm wearing gloves. The stuff gets sticky on your hands. And then you'll notice a pile of little cutouts in the center. Those are the offcuts from when I cut out the ends on the miter saw. And I use those to clamp up the piece because they'll give me a good clamping surface. No real fancy clamps here, just my regular spring clamps, my quick clamps I should say. And all 3 sides get the same treatment. Just make sure that you line up the edges so that they're nice and smooth transitions, although we'll sand those later. And then lift it off the table so that it doesn't glue itself down with anything that may have run off the end. And now with the stretchers taken care of and the main part of the base, let's work on the legs. Just as before, I went ahead and sprayed it with a little bit of water and then put on the glue and spread it out with a little stick. Make sure I got even coverage on all sides. And there's a small stack of offcuts that are the same width as the stretchers. That'll make sure that that gap between the 2x4s is the same as the stretchers, so that when I go assemble, everything should slip right in. And now just clamp it, making sure that I have it well aligned so I don't have to trim too much off later once the glue has set. And I'm work my way around. I'll end up with 3 clamps on this side. Can never have enough clamps, never can. And now I'm going to flip the whole piece over and add a couple of clamps to the other side. Once I've done this side, we're going to leave it overnight to make sure the glue cures really well.
When I took the legs out of the clamps, I discovered that the glue had turned into a rubbery mess, and the legs had fallen apart. I could re-glue everything, but I've decided to make a design change. I'm going to cut a dado into the legs and dado them into the cross members. I think that'll make the design a lot lighter and the table look a lot better.
Now you'll notice I used a couple of spacers to set everything up. One of them is the actual thickness of the stretcher, and the other one is a 3/4 inch setup block that is the thickness of the stacked dado head cutter. That way I can make sure that the dado that I cut out is just right. And now to every woodworker's favorite, sanding. I say that jokingly, there's actually some people out there who enjoy this part. I started with making sure that the 60-degree miters were smooth and flat, and then rounded over those corners. In retrospect, I should have sanded the inside of the 2x4s for the stretcher before I glued everything up. This way, kind of the little ends aren't quite smooth. But I go through all the surfaces, do a bit of hand sanding to round over the corners, and then proceed onto the legs. Now, once everything is sanded, I went ahead and did a setup for where the legs go. It's going to be 4 inches in from the end. And then I used the leg itself on the inside to figure out where I'm going to put a couple of screws. Originally, I was going to glue this up, but after the legs had fallen apart, I decided that a couple of screws on each leg should do it. I'm going to use some Type On 3 waterproof glue. Spread it out with my finger. Best tool in the world. And then just set it up. Now remember that whole discussion about spacers? Piece slides right in. And I'm going to set a couple of clamps to hold it all in place while I flip it over and put some screws. 2.5 inch decking screws will do the trick. Before I put in the second screw, even though I didn't show it, I used a square to make sure the legs were square to the stretchers. Now to staining. I sped up the video and showed you the entire staining process. I have the piece on upside down. I'm going to do the bottoms and the insides first. I'm using a red chestnut stain. Not outdoor stain, but this piece is going to be under the lanai, so I don't expect any issues with needing UV protection. I put it on with a rag, as I said, and then come by with a white paper towel and wipe that off. Now we're going to let the piece rest overnight. And next day, we're going to put in some feet. These are all galvanized nails, so no problems with rusting. And on the top, we're going to use some grommets to hold the glass in place. And here's the final piece outside on the lanai. Looks just like the picture. Well, hopefully you enjoyed this video. And as always, join us next time to see what else we'll build on Rick's Woodworking.